Hello all. So this week's video is going to be a lot more about my personal experience as a martial artist and more as a student of a martial arts school and what that was like for me. And my goal in doing this is actually pretty selfish. It's more about just me putting out there what happened and why my perspective is the way it is, why I see things the way I do, and hopefully the outcome can be that other people see this and can relate to it and can assess their own situations and make decisions that are going to benefit them and lead them to healthier, happier lifestyles. So, before I get into the topic itself, just a little bit more background as to where I'm coming from this. I am 25 years old. I started Kung Fu in the fifth grade. I never stopped. I kept up with my training until, well, I never stopped. I left the old Kung Fu school at 2020 when the pandemic occurred, and I have not turned back since. I don't regret that decision. I think that was one of the best decisions I've ever made. But, and let me explain that a little clearer. The pandemic did not make me stop going. It was kind of the catalyst, but I had made the decision to say, hey, I'm not going back. And I decided to stop going to the school about a week before the government decided to shut everything down. So I preemptively made the decision to distance myself from other people to keep my family safe. At that point, I was living with my grandma, didn't want to get anybody else sick. So I made that decision. Then from that point forward, I've been flying solo. And it's been an uphill battle because I have to learn to fall in love with the practice again because of everything that I went through and how that shaped my perspective on my practice. Somewhere in me, I know that this practice has the capacity to make the world a better place at varying capacities. When I say make the world a better place, it's never going to be in a making the whole world or saving the world kind of deal. I believe that every person is their own unique world, and helping people better their lives is, in fact, helping better their world. So I like to look at it that way, and that making the world a better place starts with each individual person's worldview. And Kung Fu, Tai Chi, Qigong, all these traditional practices have the capacity to help people at varying capacities relative to what it is that they want to do with the practice. However, there are times where this practice can be taken out of context or can lead people to abuse power because we're working sometimes with disenfranchised people, with people who have low self-esteem, who are working to build confidence, who have no place that they feel comfortable belonging to. And, it really comes back to with great power comes great responsibility, right? We have a responsibility to our students to guide them towards their unique best interests, not our interest, right? I'm not going to condition my students to follow down my path. I'm not going to tell my students that they need to have an undying loyalty to me, to the lineage, and all that nonsense. First and foremost, students need to be loyal to themselves, right? They need to care about themselves, respect themselves first and foremost. And that starts with me respecting them, me being loyal to my student base and their each unique individual needs. And it starts with humility in that I'm not above them. I might have more content, I might have a unique set of skills that I can teach them, but their lived experience is not discounted because of my experience in this practice. I believe that I need to meet my students where they're at, assess their own wants and needs, right? I came from a background that wasn't very much like that. We had to fall in line. We had to follow the direction of the teacher, and that was it. If the teacher said we didn't do it, we didn't do it. If the teacher said to do it, we did it. And that falls into a whole variety of different categories. And I just don't vibe with that. And I didn't vibe with that for a while, and I just kind of sucked it up. And it led to a lot of internal conflict. I did not agree with the terminology that was provided to me at first. When I was discussing this with a couple of other people, a handful of them expressed that my experience was very cult-like. And the people that expressed this to me, one of which was my brother, and he was a part of this environment for a very long time too. And the other two, one of them was a religious person, and the other person was one of the people that helped to reinforce a lot of what was perpetuated at the dojo. And today I can't really blame them, because they were a part of the same BS that I was, and they got fed the same stuff, they got groomed the same way. But it still happened, and I didn't really take them seriously when they said it. So who really got through to me, and I know that the other two people planted seeds, but my brother really got through to me because he was able to walk me through it and kind of share his lived experience with me, and it was viable because it was a very similar lived experience. And it took me a while to really come into that and identify that my experience was very cult-like. And perhaps it's fair to say that I was a part of a martial arts cult, and I've seen one gentleman on YouTube who also has a similar experience, and I believe his martial art was Aikido. And for the purposes of this video, I have written down like key points to kind of clarify what identifies a cult relative to my perspective and how we're going here. And the source that I got for all this was Masterclass. They had some article about it. Their class that gave insight into what a cult was, I guess kind of like a synopsis of the course. So a cult essentially refers to a group of people with atypical beliefs living in relative isolation. They centralize around one person who orders the beliefs, behaviors, and customs of all the other members in the group. They had broken down a cult into 4 elements, only 3 of which were relevant. One of which was authoritarian control. Members of the cult are led to feel incapable of living life outside the cult, and they have this worshipful attitude which is ingrained into their practice. The second one was extremist beliefs, having that kind of unquestioning faith and having that kind of fear of being reprimanded for questioning or having differences in ideology. Then social isolation, and that's essentially like creating like this hive mind in that the cult is the family, and you all kind of operate in the same schema, I believe is the best word to phrase that. I have to look that up. And you're essentially like avoiding social contact with other people because how could they ever understand you, right? You're such a unique group with a strong beliefs, and only your leader knows the way. And so you're stuck into this group where you feel you belong because you all share these same unique beliefs that nobody else could possibly understand, or nobody else has the capacity to enact or invoke change as the leader of said cult. So, how does that pertain to my experience? In my school, there was a lot of like rules and regulations, some of which were written down, some of which were kind of unspoken rules, and you kind of had to be invited into it to really be indoctrinated into this practice, if you will. So, authoritarian control. Life outside the dojo was kind of shamed. There was a handful of times where our teacher would kind of be like, why would you go hang out with your friends when you could come and hang out with your sifu and practice and train and blah, 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 So all of that stuff was there, but there was more to it. We were told not to seek outside education, right? So so many times it was like, oh, MMA is bullshit when Kung Fu has this and the other. Oh, boxing only has so many techniques. Kung Fu has a million techniques. And all these different things. And even when it came to learning different Kung Fu styles, like, oh no, it's going to conflict with what you know. It's going to ruin what you already know. And it's like, well, if we're not allowed to ask questions, if we're not allowed to seek out answers for ourselves, how can we truly grow? But how can we really have that perspective when we've been conditioned to believe that our Sifu, our teacher, has all the answers? He knows the way because he has X amount of years of experience. He's the sole disciple of X, Y, and Z. Furthermore, we were, as previously mentioned, we were advised not to spend that much time or spend any time with like friends or family because of that same kind of concept we were talking about earlier, that they can't understand where we're at, right? Where there were times where he would be like, I hate the saying, I'm only human. We are Kung Fu people. We can be superhuman and all this kind of like delusions of grandeur, making us out to be better than other people because we practice. And it sounds ridiculous now, but because we practice the martial arts, and Kung Fu is such a broad, philosophical, and rich practice that it made us better than other people. So why belittle ourselves by spending time with people who could not understand us, who could not fathom what we are capable of? Dating people within the class, making friends with people within the class was also heavily advised against, especially the dating thing. And that's then some trauma on my teacher's part, but it was like we could engage in class, but we would have to seek permission from our teacher to hang out outside of class. And we were teenagers, we broke the rules, of course, every now and again. And it got to a point where we were just like, whatever, this is what we do. We're still going to class, we're still doing our thing, and it's just a group of us hanging out. And I guess that's kind of where we started to open our eyes to the situation. But yeah, it was weird. How can we spend all this time together, train together, but there was always this clear distinction between, yes, you're Kung Fu people and you hang out for Kung Fu, for training, for this, that, and the other, but outside of that, it was weird. And I think the only reason we really got away with it was because we also all went to the same high school. There was also this kind of attitude that like doing things for fun was not valuable, in that like, why would we play video games, why would we indulge in certain things for just the sake of pleasure, not even like a physical gratification, just fun, going to hang out. And it was like, if it did not create value, it was kind of frowned upon. But what really defined value? And that's the thing too, is like there was not a clear definition of what we were supposed to do outside of training, because training strengthens your mind and builds the spiritual blah 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 blah. And it's like, well, what is life outside of this? Then there was like uh, an excessive amount of bowing and like a weird way that we needed to be addressing him. And it was like, when your teacher walks in the door, we all had to stop what we were doing, stand up, and bow to the man. And if we were sitting down as he was walking by, after we had already bowed to him, we had to stand up and bow to him again. And it was like, one time, I was like I don't know, probably 14 at this point, maybe even 13, just sitting down, stretching, waiting for my class to start. He walks by and I bow, and I'm getting scolded for it because you don't do that, right? He's your Sifu. You're supposed to stand up and praise his balls. I don't know. But we would get reprimanded for the dumbest things from time to time. And it's usually those kinds of things. And some people might argue, oh, this is the ethical way to do it. This is how you show respect, blah, blah, blah. Yes, I understand showing respect. But when does respect become worship, right? And it was like we had to worship the ground this man walked on. And he kind of led us to believe a lot of these delusions about him that made us really augment our sense of reality for a while. And then this one's my favorite, and it was like gratitude, right? It was like we had to be grateful for every little shit, and literally every little shit. So it was like, oh, you guys are complaining about having to clean and blah blah blah, but you should be grateful for cleaning. When my Sifu said, hey, there's this, that, and the other that needs to get done, I didn't ask questions. I just did it because I'm a great student. I was a loyal student. And we would kind of be shamed for not being the same exact loyal ass kissing student that he claims he was. And keep in mind, it's not even like, yes, you're getting paid for this, you should be doing it. Like, no, we were not getting paid for this. We were paying tuition and working. So that's another thing that kind of led me to highlight this portion of authoritarian control, is that I was paying tuition the whole time. There was no point in time at that school where I was not paying tuition. I got, and here's how our hierarchy worked. For a student, if you got to a certain point where they're deemed you worthy, you got promoted to C Die. As you progress and they deemed you worthy, you got promoted to C Hing. After that, you may or may not have been promoted to Dai Si Hing, and then from there, Sifu and whatever else they wanted to gauge it. There was no clear pathway to get there. It was just kind of when they said and what they felt like. So, yes, we were not getting paid for it, and the way it worked was we were invited to their special team, and we were given exclusive access to a certain amount of content. And at first, it was cool. The training was hard. It helped us to develop and grow, and we were really being challenged and learning a lot. As time progressed, it just became a waste of time, really. We would meet up every other Friday, I believe, and just dig around, really. Practicing a bunch of corny two-man sets and 12 road Tontoi. Even if we did that, at one point we just stopped doing anything that was remotely challenging and just focused on the fancy stuff, the stuff that really didn't serve much value outside of being a demo team. And the more I look at it, they were building us to be the demo team. They were building us to have this skill set so that we could teach, so that we could pass it on. And it was kind of tit for tat at that point, in theory, right? You are receiving this body of knowledge, now you're expected to go teach or to go clean or to do this. And for me and my little group, those 4 of us, we had to take on everything. And the rest of the group really didn't do jack shit. So it's like they took advantage of us because of our youth. Most of the other members were adults, or late teens. We were early teens or pre-teens at that. And they took us in and said, all right, y'all are going to bear this weight. And we bring it up to their attention. Hey, nobody else is pitching in. Didn't really matter. And even then, the amount of work that we were doing was never good enough. So we were there 5 to 6 days a week. We were assisting every single class that we possibly could assist relative to our skill set. We were there every Friday teaching other people in this special team. So neglecting our own training, and not that there was much training to begin with at that point. And all of that, between being there and it sucked. During the weekday, during school nights, there were times, and this did not happen like once, this happened regularly, where our schedule was basically wake up early in the morning, go to school, get out of school at like 3:30, from 3:30 to like 4:30, we had a break, from I'm gonna say like 5 o'clock on, we were at the Kung Fu school. So from 5 o'clock on to about 8, maybe 7, we were teaching. Then from 7 to like 8, we had our class. And then from 8 onward, God knows what we were doing. Right? So we had our class. Then during our class, we would break up, teach everybody else in our own class. And then class was over. It's time to clean. Time to organize. Time to put this away. Time to decorate. Time to do this. Time to do that. And that meant us being there sometimes till 1 in the morning. on a school night. And it didn't fucking matter. They didn't really seem to care. My parents were pissed about it. They didn't seem to care, so we didn't care. Again, keep in mind we were kids. So we were roped in. We thought that this was the way. This is what we were supposed to be doing. We were this unique group of people. We had a special skill set. We had an obligation to do all of these things because we had such a profound passion and wealth of knowledge to pass on, to teach, to maintain, make sure the school's great so that they can continue doing the great work that they're doing. And that's the kind of BS that we grew up with. And now back to my own side. So all of that continued to happen up until my departure. And I made the conscientious decision to try and stray away from it and make sure nobody else had to deal with it when I was about 16, 15, 16. That's when I really started to see the bullshit, and I did my best to make sure that I didn't have to deal with as much crap as I thought I did. And I didn't want the younger kids that were up and coming to have to go through the same shit that I went through. So, what did I do differently, right? I made sure that they had one task, and that was it, right? You're a part of this special team. You're going to pay for your dues, if you will, by doing one task, right? That means you clean one thing, you're done. Go home. You don't need to be here till 1 in the morning. And it's not like, if we were training and you're having fun, you want to be here and you have the choice to be here, sure, that's a different story. But you're out here doing, child labor, really. And again, they're going to argue that it was voluntary. But how much of that can you really put on a child, right? A child to volunteer their time, they don't really know better, right? And when you get a 14-year-old kid who's passionate about this practice, and you're like, hey, this is the way, and they're going to follow suit. They don't know better. This is what they know. This is what they learned. This is the one place that they felt secure, right? They thought that they could trust, that the dojo had the student's best interest in mind. And that was not the case. They had their own interests in mind. So I tried to make sure that that wasn't the case regarding the cleaning and labor aspect of it with this special team. That didn't really change much for me, though. And what I mean by that is that no matter how much work I put in, it didn't change anything until they felt that I was at a breaking point. Once they felt that I was at a breaking point, here's a new form, here's a promotion, here's this, here's that. And it's just like they kept on trying to find ways to pin me down. And I can't really say that it worked, but I can't really say that it didn't work because I saw the bullshit, but I still stuck around. And I'll get into why a little bit later. Then another thing that sucked was that, like I mentioned earlier, we weren't getting paid for any of this, but we were still paying tuition. By the time I was 16 and kind of rebelling against this established norm, I think I had begun teaching classes for payment, but what I was being paid did not equate to the amount of my tuition. So yes, I was employed, but I was also paying for my classes. And their rationale was, oh, your parents are paying for your classes, not you. If it were you paying for your classes, that'd be a different story. Well, how the fuck can I pay for my classes if all my time is spent here or at school? Right? So I don't have the time to get a job and pay for my fucking classes because I'm here servicing you. Right? So that sucked. And it didn't really occur to me earlier, or, the weight of it didn't really occur to me until way later because, I was a 16-year-old kid. I wasn't really concerned about the payment. I was in the hands of my parents most of the time. I even forgot we were paying for this shit. So whenever that thought would cross my mind, it would definitely frustrate me and make me question the sincerity of everything. But that was my experience. So I dabbled in a little bit of other things, but that was mainly the authoritarian control component. Extremist beliefs. So a lot of that was, there's only one way to do this right. And the one way to do it right was my teacher's way. And there was no real questioning it, right? So, in a martial context, if I learned a movement that I didn't think was feasible or just seemed impractical, and I was like, all right, well, I'm gonna change it and practice it in a way that fits me, that was frowned